Welcome to the Leading a Mosaic World podcast. Today, I'm privileged to have as my guest Ayodele Olajiga. In addition to working with businesses and executives to achieve top-line growth and operational transformation, he has previously worked with leading global corporates like McKinsey and Company and Rand Merchant Bank, serving in corporates as a management consultant and investment banker across several countries and indeed continents. He is the founder of Foodpro Limited, a food processing company based in Nigeria, which produces cashew nut snacks. In addition, he is a founder and board member for Teach for Nigeria. The British version is Teach First. It's a non-profit organisation which is focused on developing a movement of leaders across Nigeria who are committed to eradicating educational inequity. Ayodele, or shall I say for short, Ayo, thank you for being here with me today. For context, can I start off by asking you, around when were you born? Because when we were born has an impact on how we see the world.
1974.
Okay.
My first birthday was it was actually a coup in Nigeria on that day. So that was it. But I was turning one then. That was when I was born.
Yeah. So you weren't really aware of what was going on around you, but you do know historically. And so I was going to ask you, where were you born? So I guess you were born in Nigeria.
I was born in Ibadan, the city of Ibadan.
Okay. I know it's
Nigeria.
I know Ibadan, as you said, that's the southwestern side of Nigeria. So can I ask, what was it like for you growing up in Nigeria, Ibadan, or just generally? What was your childhood like?
Well, I mean, I was the first kid, so I had a happy childhood, and I mean, I'm the first of five. Growing up was, some of what I remember was interesting. But I mean, I always tell people that, I don't remember that much. So people tell me maybe I'm hiding some of the memories, but I don't remember it. The stuff I remember, though, was a lot of fun.
Yeah. And I will come back, though, because you mentioned that when you were one, that there was a coup when you were one. And for people that haven't been in an environment where such things have taken place, that might sound quite stark.
Yeah, it was it's not all coups are violent, but this was a violent change of government because they assassinated quite a number of people, and so it was a military change of government. It was military to military, but it was still violent. But I mean, like I said, I was one, so.
So you weren't aware of it, and none of those things had an impact on your childhood, one way or the other.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say directly, but what was going on was as they were changing governments, they were creating, new states, new structures of government, and that meant moving, from city to city because my parents were civil servants.
Okay. And so
I would say, I don't know if that impacted me in terms of my education, but we did move around, basically.
Okay. Which is fair enough, and that comes with pros and cons as well. You, as I said, you have worked as a management consultant, investment banking. What informed your career journey?
It's interesting. I think, I'd love to sit here and tell you that I had this perfect plan and stuff, but the journey was very simple. When I left school, I was a trained engineer. I go into the technology space because I was basically following after my dad, who was an electronics engineer. I did exactly the same, course in the same university. So, but that's kind of where it stopped because as soon as I came out, the options that were available as engineer in Nigeria at the time, I didn't find any of them exciting. So I decided to do a self-study for about, 6 months and switched to the technology space. In terms of the network management and network engineering stuff. And so that's how I left engineering. And I think in 2000, I left Nigeria to do a master's in the US. I did a master's in telecoms. And it was then, but I continued to work as a, network engineer. And one of the clients we served was American Express. And that was the first time I had exposure to, I guess you could call them suits, because, there were all these guys around, all these chaps wearing suits and tie and all of that stuff. I mean, the best dress we got was, polo top and jeans, because sometimes you were pulling cable. You don't know wear suits to do that. And that's when I got, interested in trying to figure out, look, what do these chaps do? And, I got to talk to a few of them. And that's when I got interested in the business arena. Decided to, go to business school, went to Kellogg School of Management and focused a lot on, finance strategy and marketing. And while there's the internship with Microsoft in Seattle, they feel that was for me. Full-time, joined McKinsey in McKinsey and moved to the South African office. So I kind of was trying to move from hardcore technology into business. And so the business school facilitated that. And then I, went to McKinsey. McKinsey was quite interesting because in South Africa, I got to do work across maybe about 6 sectors: telecoms, financial services, and a few others. But the most interesting of them was when I worked in the mining space and got the opportunity to go down the shaft of the coal mine. You descend, I can't remember how many, meters down. But when you get out of the cage, and then you look at it, there's roads, network of roads on the ground with street lights and traffic lights, and okay. And that if there are people walking on the surface, right? You don't know that it's this whole life in the shaft. So that was interesting. We were doing an operational turnaround of a mine. So that was exciting for me. Did McKinsey for about just 3 years, and then decided, I wanted to do something else because, McKinsey can be a lot in terms of the amount it takes out of you. And then I joined Rand Bank. The first half of it was okay because, I was doing regular investment banking, IPOs, that kind of stuff. But I mean, the pace was nowhere compared to what was happening in McKinsey. So, I would say that first 5 years was a little bit boring, but it was all right. Then the second half got a lot exciting because then the board wanted to go into West Africa, and, I was tapped up to be part of that team to lead us into West Africa, which involved, maybe a few failed attempts to buy a bank in Nigeria. And then we ended up starting a merchant bank, and that merchant bank runs today. It's doing quite well. And actually, one of my colleagues who was part of that team that we started the bank together is now just resumed as the CEO of the bank. So the bank is doing quite well. I left the bank in end of 2015 into Foodpro, which was something myself and 2 friends that started up. We picked up a moribund cashew factory, and the plan was to turn it around. It was going on the side, but wasn't quite working. And so at the end of 2015, I took a break from banking to go and try and sort that out. Initial plan wasn't to spend more than 2 years doing it and then, get someone else. But that ended up going for about 4 years. And I mean, the journey of Foodpro was quite interesting. It was mixed. I guess when I look at it, it was mixed. It was a mixed outcome, because as soon as I got in, things just became really difficult. It's probably the most difficult thing I've ever done because, suddenly I was trying to build a business with no, corporate support, nothing. It was basically me and, 2 other people, even though they were not in the business. And quite a number of things which, we got done, built a factory, got that factory certified, started to export products, created retail products. So all of that was very exciting. I had, close to about 400 women at some point working for us. There were also our challenges. We had too much leverage. That became a problem. There was, FX situation in Nigeria. I mean, any Nigerian business person listening to me is probably going like, yeah. And, it was challenging that, COVID came, and that also affected the business, And then as far as resolving the leverage in the business, I decided to exit and move to the UK. It was kind of during COVID, but I left the country just before COVID really. No, actually, I was stuck in the country for about 3 months when COVID took off. And then I managed to find my way out of Nigeria because my family is based in the UK. And then I started the process. And I think at the end of last year, I exited the business completely. So today I have nothing to do with Foodpro. what I do now is, got my own consulting firm, working with, business owners and businesses in terms of, coaching, consulting, or mentoring. And then I also, once you start a business before, it doesn't ever go away. So I've also got this part of my time that I'm, developed. I think about three different businesses now, but they're all in the development stage. Nothing's running yet.
Okay.
Yeah, but maybe let me pause there.
Yeah, no, thank you. I mean, that is lovely, because that gives me a picture of your journey. And what I'd love to do is just to explore a few things in just a little bit more detail. And starting with McKinsey, I'm just curious, from what you've said, it's a very fast-paced environment, but it's an organization that's known across the world for leadership. Are there any core leadership messages that you still think of today that you would say to anyone leading within an organization, especially within the world that we're living in today, that these are some things that I learned from McKinsey that it would be useful for you to apply?
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a lot, but I think the first, when I got to McKinsey, the first thing that really struck me was this idea of your obligation to dissent. And pretty much what it was saying was, look, no matter what role or, what level you are in the team, because oftentimes when you get into a McKinsey team, you're sitting around people who've been doing stuff for, decades, some of them maybe two. And so the initial reaction of any junior or new person is to say, well, listen, I'm going to keep my mouth shut and just learn, right? But McKinsey flips it on his head, right? Yeah, we recognize that we've got all these experienced people, but you bring a different perspective because you don't have all of that, experience is a good thing and also be a bad thing. You don't have all of that baggage, so you got the obligation to dissent, which means that, from the moment you sit in the team, we start to ask your opinion on what we're working on, right? And based on that, and all it is listening, all it is about giving, what you think. Irrespective of whether you think there's a risk that you might be saying something completely stupid, which, I mean, it's a high risk that I probably you might say something stupid, but the environment is such that nobody looks at that and they go, that's something stupid. They actually want to encourage you to say more, right? And so for me, I think, as a leader, you should always build teams where your people are comfortable, very comfortable contributing their thoughts. And that means that sometimes people will potentially get it wrong, but they mustn't feel like, oh my God, I got it wrong, that's the end. No, you must treat that conversation as, we're bringing ideas on the table. Some of the ideas might not work, some of them might work, who knows? But the reason why we set up this team is because of, the strengths that everybody brings to the table. And the moment anyone is not speaking, you start to lose the power of the team because, let's say you were 5, now you're firing at 80% if one person is not speaking. And if you're the kind of leader that, if someone says something and you disagree and you attack it, maybe you lose another 20%, who knows? So, I mean, I think the first thing for me was just that obligation to dissent, and as a leader, it's something you must try with your team.
Yeah, and that's great to me because I talk about a mosaic world. I talk about everyone being different and everyone having something of value to offer. And what you're really talking about is how leaders bring out the value, having a diversity of people, different stages of experience, different ideas, backgrounds, and how you work with them to ensure that you realize the value that everyone has to offer. So that resonates with me, and I absolutely love that. Something else that came to my mind as you were talking about McKinsey is the consultancy firm. You mentioned that with Foodpro, you are running a business, there's minimal support around you. A lot of leaders within organizations, especially smaller organizations, feel at times it can be lonely. They need support from a consultancy firm. whether it's a large firm like McKinsey or it's a small firm like yourself now, are there any key points that you would say if you are looking to bring support in? I mean, first and foremost, well, look no further than me, but in terms of you, Ayo. But outside of that, are there any key things that you would say this is something you should think about when bringing in support to help you with your business?
Yeah, I think, oftentimes consultants get bashed, especially maybe the big ones, for they came in, nothing happened, we spent all this money, we didn't move forward and stuff. And I always say to people that the first thing is, as a business leader or owner, even if you hire consultants or coaches or whatever it is, the first thing you must realize is that you own the problem. No matter how many people you bring in, you own the problem. And that mentality is important. You have to have that mindset. Now, once you have that mindset, the question then becomes, what do you want the consultant to do for you? So maybe you need to make a decision. And the question is, what do you need to know to help you make that decision? And then you can then say, look, who's best placed to get me that answer? But remember that even when they go and get that answer, you still need to make a decision. And because the benefits and the risk sit with you. They don't sit with the consultant, they don't sit with anyone else, because once you make that decision, those guys go away. I mean, they've done their job and they've gone. You need to make that decision. So I always say that, look, as a business leader or business owner, you need to know what you need from any professional you bring into your business. Because oftentimes, I hear a lot of, oh my God, the consultants were useless. This. And I always first say that, look, it's possible maybe the consultants were useless, but did you know what you wanted them to do actually? Did you know what question you wanted them to answer? All of that stuff. Because the fact that I've given you, so I can do a big analysis and tell you what I've found. At the end of the day, you still need to make that decision. And then when you make that decision, you still then need to execute around whatever you've decided, going through a process. Even when you've done all of that, there's no guarantee that you get the results that you seek, because there's an external environment that's also active. But if you follow the process and you execute very well, you give yourself a very high chance of getting the results you're after. But first and foremost, be very clear on how you use professional services. Now, as a small business owner, I always say that, look, first, two things I think is important for you to get. One is, as much as possible, try and get a mastermind. What do I mean by that? It's similar people on the same journey as you, where you can go and talk and just share what you're going through, because your people are looking to you for leadership. They're not necessarily looking to you to tell them your problems, right? So you need somewhere to go and sit down and just talk and see that you realize that, okay, I'm not alone, right? That's the first one. The second one is, I think that you should get a coach. Now, I always say to people, my own belief is from a coaching, because I see a lot of coaches who haven't, either they haven't run businesses or they haven't done all that stuff. I'm the old school, listen, you need to have the stripes to be able to help someone else. Though some people tell me that there are coaches who haven't had any experience, but they can help people. To each his own. My view is, or maybe you then call the coach a mentor or whatever name you want to give it. The journey you're going on, it would be nice to have someone alongside you who's maybe a few steps ahead of you, right? Who can maybe call you on your, maybe you're going the wrong way and say, listen, what you're doing there is nonsense. Or can even tell you, listen, you could do a lot more than you're doing, right? It's just somebody who is not in the dance, who is looking at everything and saying, yeah, look, you could do a lot more, or you're pushing too far, or the way you're managing your people doesn't work, or you're not holding them accountable. Just things that come from having experienced that. Because it's certain things that you can't tell people unless you've experienced it. You can read about it and talk about it, but until it's the 29th of the month, and you have no idea how you're going to meet payroll, but somehow you made it happen. Until you've gone through that stuff, Please don't go talking to small business owner, telling them about how, you need to make sure you pay your people on time and do this. You have no idea what you're talking about, right? But once you've been through it a few times, then you realize, okay, look, I can give you advice here, but, so that's, maybe let me pause there. But there's a lot, in that space as to how business leaders and business owners get support.
Yeah. So I guess and that's very useful. I'm a very big advocate for mastermind groups myself and coaching support. But there's something from what you've said that if you're bringing in a consultant, have clarity about the problem that the challenge, the initiative that you want them to support you with. I know that a lot of the time businesses don't always have that clarity, and often if you go into an organization, the problem that you thought or they said they had is different from what the real issue is. So for me, it's therefore good that you then mentioned the value of also having a coach or a mastermind group, because I think they help you to better define and clarify the problem so that when you do need to bring in a consultant, you're clear about what the need is, and you also have other people's experience that can help you to define what you want them to do or where not to go, etc. So I think that's great. Thank you very much for that.
Oh, that's if anyone was going to take anything away, that word clarity is what I would say. Because when I work with my clients, before we take any step, we've got to get clear what you're doing. Because if you're not clear on what you're doing or where you're going or what you want to achieve, nothing else works, because it's like we're kind of just shooting in the dark. But once you invest in getting very clear, I think, it's like running downhill from there. It doesn't mean things won't be challenging, but at least we know, okay, listen, we're driving from London to Liverpool. With Liverpool we're going to. Not maybe we stop in Manchester or maybe we do this. So, because that's oftentimes what happens in businesses. You see, there's so much ambiguity. I don't know if you've read some of the one I laugh about is the job descriptions. You say job description, it's like 3 pages long. I can't read it, and I'm like, so what do you want this person to do? Oh, want them to be sales manager. I say, yeah. But what exactly do you want them to do? And then you realize the person on the other side, don't really know. They've just kind of realized, okay, lump everything together and stuff. And I'm like, a well thought out job description, there's a few lines, but it's exactly what you want. Gets you farther than all this, really nice looking, so many flowery words, but there's no clarity in that.
What would you recommend? So if I was running a business and I'm looking for a sales manager, what's the process that you, just in brief terms, the process that you would recommend I follow? And what would you say a job description should include?
I think for me, the first thing is always, what's the one thing, right, that you need for your business in that area that if it happened, the business would take off or you would achieve your objective? And I think that is the first thing you want to put down on your job description. Obviously, people that want to know, who's the company, what kind of benefits, what kind of qualifications you want and stuff. But I always say that, look, in terms of what you want, it must be there. I want you to build, I'm looking for someone to build, I don't know, a sales team in London, for instance. If that's what you're looking for, then put it there. Don't go and copy all of this interesting stuff on the internet. It looks like a really great JD, reads very well, but doesn't get you the best you're looking for.
So in effect, it's like we as a business, this is who we are as a business. This is what we're trying to achieve. This is what we require from a sales perspective, and just focus in on that without going and talking about all the niceties and other things which aren't directly relevant to what you as an organization are trying to achieve.
Yeah. Because I read some JDs, you have all these requirements. You must have a master's degree, you must have this, you must have that, you must. And the question I ask when I walk with my clients is, why do you want this master's degree? Because there's so many people with master's degree that, it's not going to help you. So be clear that every line you put in that job description, you're very clear why you put it there. Because you're trying to attract a certain kind of person. But if you now put all this other stuff that drives those people away.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah.
Can I then go on to Rand Merchant Bank? And you were in South Africa at that time.
Yes.
You were doing work.
Yeah.
Yeah, work in different areas of Africa, different sectors, different parts of Africa. I'm curious because a lot of the time people say Africa and they say Africa as if it's just a country without reflecting the diversity of Africa. And often I hear people talking about negatives. From your experience, what are the great things about working across the continent of Africa that you would say to people, whether they're in Africa, continue doing good things in Africa, or if you're in other parts of the world, you should engage with African countries, businesses in African countries, because...
Africa itself, there are, I think, 52 or 53 countries, and they're all very different. They all have different, business environments, different cultures. Even within some of them, the cultures in different parts of the country are very different, And so if you approach Africa as Africa, you'll pretty much just, you'll miss it simply because you're going to apply one rule to, 52 times X groups of people. I think for me, one of the things I enjoy about working on the continent, first of all, is that the opportunity to add value is a lot. On a daily basis, if you apply your mind, you can solve real problems and have real impact, right? Unlike in some of the developed worlds, a lot of things are already kind of like solved. People are just, people are solving it at the margins, whereas, across the continent, your work can really have, meaningful impact. I think for me, when I look at Africa, I think the work to be done is really for Africans in the sense that, there is all of the negative perception of the continent. If I take Nigeria, for instance, and maybe even Ghana and some of this other, even South Africa, is driven by narratives by people within the continent, right? And if you have a negative, overwhelming negative view of where you are, of the local you're in, your ability, I don't know how to describe it, but your ability to solve problems is limited because your mindset is very negative. I don't know how to explain, I don't know the word I'm looking for, but if I am in a place and I truly believe in the place, I love the place, the actions that I take lead to impact, right? But if I'm constantly horrified, appalled and complaining and beating up on, it's like I become a victim. Whenever you're a victim, victims don't do much, right? Because they've been victimized, and then so long as they keep that mindset, they don't get to do anything. Now, it doesn't mean that tough things are not happening, right? It's rather more like, okay, look, tough things are happening, but if I keep my mind on the positive, I can start to be part of the solutions to the tough things. But right now, everybody's kind of like, this. If you look at Nigeria, for instance, quite a number of anybody who has an opportunity just wants to get out. Now I always say, well, look, where you're going to and getting out to, they also have their own problems. And so you're going to inherit their problems, plus the fact that in that new place now, you become a foreigner. And God help you if they don't really, like foreigners of your kind, it could become a challenge. But overall, if you look at Africa, it's a land full of all kinds of resources, but has not been able to maximize his most important resource, which is the people. And the moment we start to tap into the people, you start to see, changes in Africa. And things are changing, but it's just that, you have to go and look to see it. Whereas, the narrative is all the, as you know, by themselves.
So how would you recommend, so if I was a leader in Africa, how would you recommend that I tap into that rich resource of amazing people?
I think, first of all, as a leader in Africa, you've got to, one, be ambitious. And the reason for that ambition is because almost everything around you is kind of pedestrian. But if you have your eye clearly on an ambition where you want to go, and then you combine that with starting to deliver, right? Because people have seen all kinds of people who promise all kinds of stuff, but they never do it. But if people can tell when you're genuine, and people can tell when there's an original person. So if you spend the time being clear on why you want to lead and where you want to go, then people will follow you. That's my view. Because if you take any country across Africa, there's 75% chance you cannot tell what is in their national interest. Compare that with maybe the US or someone else. They are very clear what their national interest is, and they will, drive towards that. Whether they achieve them or not, it's not really relevant. It's more about being clear on what are we about. Imagine if you had a company where, we're not sure what the company is about, what the company wants to do. I mean, how long do you think it'll take before that company goes out of business? So when you look at countries on the continent, we need to be able to answer the question, what's in your national interest?
Yeah, no, so there is that whole thing about, again, it goes back to clarity and vision. I was going to then ask you about Foodpro, but what you said almost naturally leads on to Teach for Nigeria, which is, I guess, about young people. How does the work of Teach for Nigeria fit into that whole role of creating greater clarity and vision and enabling and better enabling the rich resources of people within Nigeria?
For us in Teach for Nigeria, even before I got involved with some other people to start Teach for Nigeria, before I finished university, I've always been about an educated society. And what do I mean by education? It's a society where people can think clearly, they can come up with ideas, they can execute the ideas, will be a prosperous society. That's it. Right? And one of the things that's very crucial to that is the ability to think. Right? If you look at our education system in Nigeria, critical thinking is something that's missing. People are kind of just like being loaded with information, right? And then that information, they, during exam, they regurgitate it back. And depending on who's best at memorizing, that person does very well. And they go all the way through, some to university, some not. And then obviously when they get into positions and they're not able to solve problems, everybody's wondering why. But then they've gone through a system that hasn't ever required them to solve problems. It's just always required them to kind of like read all of this stuff and be able to tell me what you read, but not really what's the implication of what you read. If you were to write it, would you write it differently? If you wrote it differently, why did you write it differently? All of those things that kind of challenges your mind to start to think don't happen, right? So from back then, I've always volunteered in some of these disadvantaged areas to teach. And so, when I met I think about 4 or 5 other people, like-minded people who were saying, think like that. The question was, what could we do to start to, influence what's going on in the education arena in Nigeria? And the one we landed on was, look, let's bring the teach, I guess you can call the franchise.
Teach first. Teach.
Because the global one is called Teach for All. And the idea is about creating leaders who have, who have the consciousness around the challenges in the education space, right? That's what it really is. And the mission is that one day every child in Nigeria would have access to quality education. And what do we call quality education? Not the PhD or the master's. No. It's just education that allows you to unleash the power of your mind, which is simply being able to think, being able to solve problems. I promise you, if we can start to solve problems in Africa, the continent will move forward rapidly. Just take problems and solve them. Don't complain about them. There was maybe injustices in the past. There were all kinds of stuff that happened in the past. But okay, you know what? They've happened. We're where we are now. Can we just start to solve problems? Because if we solve problems, we move forward, period. And by the way, it applies to this country we're in as well, the UK, where it's just a lot of complaining. Just start solving problems. It's not going to be easy, but it's not going to be any worse than if you just sit there and did nothing.
No, and that makes a lot of sense. And I think I'm glad you mentioned that some of these things apply to the UK as well, because I think these are global issues. So we're building clarity, revision, problem solving. And I'm interested to know, with Teach for Nigeria, are there any key things that you can highlight that as a result of having Teach First in Nigeria, these are one or two things that you have seen that are different, or like just this one young person that has gone on to do this? It's just, because for me, those are the things that get me excited.
Yeah, look, firstly, we have a fantastic scene. She's not like that. If you give her a mic, you have to yank the mic from her because she can't stop. I think, some of the stuff I've seen is, for instance, there was on the fellows side, I've seen fellows go into communities where people couldn't really read, and I've started, they've got them to start reading. They've started book clubs. I've seen fellows start, something about female health to allow some of these kids to be back in school. And they're doing all kinds of things to get the kids to become excited about education. And we're seeing that happening, in Ogun State, in Lagos. And for us, even I think we did one in Kaduna. But for us, we'd love to be across the entire country. And the reason is because you meet someone, you meet a kid, the first time they get into the program, they're busy struggling with either, the written English or spoken English or the way or critical thinking or whatever it is. You encounter the same person 6 months or 12 months later, and you can see visibly the difference that the program has made. So for me, I think, Teach for Nigeria, if I had my way, it probably was something that I wish we had started, maybe when I was born in the 70s or something. Just because, we have all of this, apart from the impact they're having at the school level, we have all of these young people, right, who graduated, who now have the consciousness for education, who now understand that, listen, you can't be talking about a prosperous society where people can't think. It just won't work because, it's like, I'll give you an example. I'm driving on the road, right? I can see you coming. I can see there's only one space, right? So the two cars can't go. I can see you coming. I can see you're going to get there before I do. But I know that if I accelerated, I can arrive there just in time to stop you from going, right? Now, oftentimes in Nigerian traffic, the person who is a little bit far away from the other person coming does what? Accelerate. Now, the question you're asking is, why are you accelerating? Is it because you don't want to go? Or is it because you're trying to stop that car? No, it's because they're trying to go first. So they end up arriving at the junction. Nobody can go. Why do you think that person does that? Because in my mind, I'm thinking, I should drive you. You're thinking about it, okay, listen, slow down. This chap goes, then I go. That's the fastest solution. But no, I'm going to go first.
To me, just thinking of me as an individual and my self-interest, as opposed to thinking of us as a whole and what works best for all of us.
Yes. But think about it though. I'm thinking of myself alone. I create the scenario that ultimately doesn't work for me.
That's
I mean,
yeah.
you see? So, and I think a lot of these things, everybody's like, oh, people are selfish, people are this. It's true. Maybe they are. I don't know. But I think a lot of this is just the inability to think. Because a lot of the people driving across the country are not educated in the way I define education.
Yeah, because one thing that is interesting for me also when we talk about education, it's not so much about the Western form of education. It's about the mind, the ability to think, to be able to analyze, to problem solve, to look at things in a holistic manner. I think we're saying the same thing when I say that.
Yes, no, you're absolutely correct. I'm not thinking about, you have a master's, because there are loads of people who have masters, and I honestly believe they're not educated. Because when you hear the things that come out of their mouths, and you're thinking, okay, you seem to know what's in the book, but do you know why? And then can you develop on what's in the book? Can you develop based on the information that you get it? And that for me is really about thinking, the ability to think. And that for me is what I call education. So if you ask me, and there was only one thing I could do, is, I would just gift everybody the ability to think, because that would solve a lot of the problems. It would solve it.
So thinking about that, you do have the qualifications, and you've been to some of the top schools in order to gain that education. But you are also a person that is a problem solver, an innovator in your own right. And I'm thinking specifically of Foodpro and what you did there. I mean, I know that you're no longer involved in Foodpro, but what was your thinking? Cashew nut snacks available on a global basis. What was going through your mind when you did that?
So the first thing I will be honest and say is, there were three of us that sat around the table to try to do this, and honestly, we were not looking at cashew nuts. We started with two of us, and we were looking at the financial crisis that happened, where we're in South Africa at the time. South Africa was able to feed itself. It's able to feed itself. It produces food, whereas Nigeria is the other side, where we're importing a lot of things. We produce locally too, but not at the scale that is required. And so we thought, look, what? Could we start, large farms where we start to reverse some of these scenarios where we have to import food? That's how we got started. And then by the time we got exposed to all the difficulties, in settling and growing food in Nigeria, we thought, okay, look, can we go and process first and then backward integrate? And so that's how we added somebody else in the team and as we looked for where could we process, we stumbled on cashew because his family had an abandoned cashew factory. We started to study the industry and realized that 51 to 52%, or maybe even 55 now, of global cashews is grown in Africa, predominantly in West Africa. There's East Africa as well, but predominantly West Africa. But less than 10% of it is processed in West Africa. Most of it is processed between Vietnam and India, right? And then the bulk of it is consumed between the US, EU, India, and I think Middle East, and then maybe China is coming up now. But if you've ever been to a cashew factory in Vietnam, that thing, you see sea of people who are working there, who create jobs, right? So we thought, look, we're in Nigeria, the US is right there, you just go through the Atlantic, you don't have to do all of that journey. If we started to process cashews, we could really start to, change the narrative. Of course, we got involved. The first lesson was, things are not always what they look like until you don't really know the true situation until you start doing it. I realized, it's a volatile industry. The margins in processing and selling the kernels alone, it's not that exciting. The propensity to lose money is very high. There was all kinds of stuff, and realized that, and I started looking at it and I thought, look, the product on the shelf, the price of the product on the shelf always seems to just go up. It doesn't go up and down. And there's nobody buying cashew nuts thinking, oh, there's a little scrape here, there's a bit of scrape, because those are the things that the guys who buy bulk used to drive the price down. Oh, you have scrapes, you have this, you have that, and they drive the price down, right? And so we started to test. We found, the first brand we launched was an old brand that existed, Lino cashews. And, one of those days in the factory, I found reams and reams of the packaging. Asked my partner, like, listen, are you still going to use this stuff? He's like, nah. And then we launched a small, 50-gram sachet pack of the product, and we started to sell it, and people accepted it. And, and the margin on that product suddenly made us a little bit more comfortable, because now we were not thinking, oh, there's this little scrape here, and, when Susan wants to buy, she's going to try to figure out when there's a scrape, and then she's going to ask for a discount. No, none of that stuff happens. So we did that, and then we thought, why not, launch a new range? And then we launched something called Go Nuts. And the real philosophy behind that was really, look, we want something that can be on the shelf anywhere in the world. Don't use the African philosophy of, let me not say African, the Nigerian philosophy that says, it's local, so you just, tie it with some, present it poorly, basically, to the consumer.
Could challenge that as a Nigerian philosophy, but continue.
Well, okay. So, but let me not call it Nigerian philosophy. Let me call it what I found in the Nigerian, food industry, which was like, what is going on? And so we started to present it differently. And, first of all, two things happened, which, made me very happy. The first thing was that people loved it. And people, even though I'm not involved anymore, people still reach out to me, like, I bought the cashews, and, I bought your cashews. I don't bother telling them I'm not involved. I just tell them buy more. And then the second thing was that maybe not everybody, all the food players, not even in cashews, in other categories, started to raise their game. Like, yeah, can I do that? Oh, can I do that? Can I do? And for me, so it makes me very happy when I see that, because I'm like, okay, well, we've influenced everybody else, which is fantastic, because we need to start to create great products for local people, great products, well presented, care about the environment, all of that stuff for local people, not, this is export grade, this is local grade. I'm like, what does that mean? Oh, well, we send all the good stuff export, and then when we can't export, we sell to the locals. So the locals here are what? And the funny thing in Nigeria is, or maybe in Lagos is, if you look at if you start to break the population down, the very wealthy per capita income people in all of those markets, obviously, if you divide it across everybody, it then gives you the idea that everybody is poor. But that's not the case. There's I guess, I don't know how big that community is, but it's big enough that, a good product can bet on them, right? And then if your product is good, your product also becomes aspirational for those people who are coming behind. Like, I remember we were at one food show, GT Bank Food Festival, and there was this lady that walked up to me. She traveled from if you're familiar with Lagos, from the mainland of Lagos, in some parts in Ikorodu and everything. She tasted the product, because we usually use those food shows to test, flavors. She tasted it and everything. And she looked at me and she was like, oh, she wanted to buy that, but that's, it's the only thing she'll be able to buy here today, though. I said, what do you mean? She was like, look, other than my transport money back, this is all I have left, but I like that. So, I ended up giving it to her. They didn't want to collect what she had left. But what I liked about it was the story that he told me that, look, people will aspire for good things, and people will continue to aspire for better things. And so therefore, your role as a business is to find a way to create that in a sustainable way. And what I mean by that is, they can pay for it. You are also making profit from it, because sometimes in some businesses in Nigeria, the profit is not there. And I always tell them, look, because people are afraid if I increase the price, they will stop buying. So if you don't increase the price, you'll probably go out of business soon anyway. So either way, they will stop buying.
Yeah, no, thank you. I'm actually just amazed by this, because through this conversation, I think there's so many things that have come up. The importance of clarity, which aligns to having a clear vision and purpose. That focus on problem solving, which leads to innovation, like the innovation that you solved, and you built a whole business with a focus on solutions, looking at someone else or some different country and thinking, they're solving problems, let's do so. And how from you looking to do something which was innovative, which was, should I say, uplifting a product, a Nigerian product, that led other people, it aspired other people within industries to do things as well. And it was also something that engaged different people from different society, that they're all fed into, like the lady that you mentioned. And I think all the things that you've done or doing are all amazing things and have an impact beyond which you may even be aware. And so I'm just going to say, in concluding, do you have any concluding thoughts on what you're doing next, how people can engage with you, get in contact with you, or what have you?
Yeah, so in terms of getting in touch with me, I don't know whether if you have the show notes, you can put my website there. My full name.com, ayodeleolajiga.com. Then also my company is called Niveli Consulting, so that's Leveli Consulting, and it's also niveliconsulting.com. Or you can find me on social media, LinkedIn. Also, I'm not so active on Instagram, but I used to be active. Probably will get back active again. Who knows? So yeah, so on the social channels and also on the website, you can find me. I guess the thing I would say is this: in concluding, as a business leader or a business owner, your real contribution to society is solving problems in a sustainable way. And, so whenever you're doing anything, get very clear on what problem you're trying to solve and then take massive action in that direction. And when you feel wrong, just go back, take the lessons, change it, and do it again. And so if you find yourself not solving problems, then the question is, what are you doing? Sometimes we solve problems, but we're not clear what it is, so we can't do a lot more of it. So get very clear on what problem you're solving and take massive action.
Thank you very much. It's been lovely having you on the Leading the Mosaic World podcast. Thank you. Thank you very much, Alex.
Very much. I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Leading the Mosaic World podcast. Do visit our website at www.mosaicworld.live to find out more about what we do and how we can be of support to you. Alternatively, connect with me, Susan Popoola, spelt Popoola, on LinkedIn, and let me know what you think of the podcast. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, give it a first-class rating, and tell everyone you know all about it. Thank you.